It was just after 2 a.m. I hadn't fallen asleep yet. I was on the couch, lights off, TV humming in the background with nothing on, just white noise filling the room. I wasn't really watching anything, I just couldn't stand the silence. Then I saw it, a VHS tape. It was sitting right on top of my old VCR, like it had been there the whole time. But I know it wasn't. I would have noticed it earlier, black, unlabeled, just sitting there like it belonged. I stared at it for a while. I don't know why, but something about it felt wrong. Off. I haven't owned tapes in years, let alone played one. But my hand moved before I could think better of it. I pushed the tape in and hit play. At first, just static. Then the picture came through. The footage was shaky and grainy, like it was filmed on an old camcorder. It showed the outside of a building. Took me a few seconds to realize it was my building. The camera was positioned across the street. It wasn't moving, just focused on the third floor. And then, slowly, it tilted up until it stopped on a single window, my window. The curtains were open, just like I left them. The blue glow from my desk lamp was visible inside. It was exactly what my apartment looked like at that moment. Then the camera started to zoom in very slowly. The closer it got, the more detail I could see. Things no camera should be able to pick up from that distance. The small crack in the lower right corner of the window, the chipped paint on the sill. Even a smudge on the glass I hadn't wiped off in days. That's when my stomach dropped. There's no building across from mine, no roof, no platform, nothing where a camera could have been mounted. Whatever filmed this had to be floating in midair. Then something else happened. A silver Honda with a dented bumper drove past in the video. I saw that same exact car earlier tonight. Around 9:45 p.m. when I came back from the store, I looked at the timestamp on the screen. This footage was recorded tonight. My hands were shaking as I jumped up and yanked the curtains shut. I stood there in the dark, heart pounding, trying to convince myself this was just some elaborate prank. But I couldn't. Whoever filmed this was watching me. They had to have filmed it just hours ago and somehow managed to get the tape inside my apartment before I even got home. Unless they already knew what they were going to record. That thought made me sit back down, my body moving on autopilot. My finger hovered over the play button again. I pressed it, and the video continued. 3 weeks ago, I moved into this apartment. Needed a fresh start after the breakup, somewhere quiet where I could work remotely without distraction. This place seemed perfect. Rent was reasonable, neighborhood peaceful, neighbors kept to themselves. The building is older, 1970s construction, with its original charm mostly intact, wood floors that creak in just the right way, bay windows that catch the morning light. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. I'm a graphic designer. My days blend together in a routine of coffee, client calls, and endless hours staring at my monitor. I'm used to isolation, even welcome it. My social circle had shrunk after the move, dwindling to occasional video calls with friends who promised to visit but never did. I didn't mind. There was comfort in the solitude. Until the box appeared, I didn't hear a knock, no doorbell, no delivery notification on my phone. It was simply there when I opened my door to collect the mail last Thursday morning. A plain cardboard box about the size of a thick hardcover book resting against my doormat. No shipping label, no return address, not even my name. My first instinct was caution. Random packages in this day and age raise red flags. But curiosity won out. I brought it inside, set it on my kitchen counter, and studied it for a long moment before carefully opening it. Inside, nestled in a single sheet of bubble wrap, was a VHS tape. Black plastic casing, slightly worn at the corners. A white label on its spine contained a single word, written in neat, precise handwriting. Watch. I almost laughed. Who still uses VHS tapes? I hadn't seen one since childhood when my parents would rent movies for Friday nights. I turned it over in my hands, looking for any other clues, but there was nothing else. Just the tape and its simple, commanding label. I set it aside, figuring it was probably meant for another apartment, some older resident who still clung to obsolete technology. I planned to ask around later, maybe check with the building manager. It wasn't until that evening, as I was clearing out a storage closet, that I discovered the VCR. It was tucked away on a high shelf, covered in a thin layer of dust, clearly left behind by the previous tenant. I vaguely recalled the landlord mentioning something about items left in the apartment that I was welcome to use or discard as I saw fit. The coincidence felt strange. Finding a VCR on the same day, a mysterious VHS appeared at my door. But I still didn't connect the dots. Didn't see the pattern forming. I plugged the VCR into my television more out of nostalgia than anything else. The familiar mechanical whir as it powered on brought back memories of simpler times. I blew dust from the tape, pushed it into the slot, and watched it disappear into the machine. Then I waited. Static filled the screen at first, that familiar analog snow, accompanied by a soft hiss from the speakers. I adjusted the tracking, a skill I hadn't used in decades but somehow remembered, and the picture began to clarify. It seemed harmless at first. Just ordinary footage of everyday scenes, a street corner I didn't recognize, a park bench, a storefront. Then came the image that made my fingers freeze on the remote. My apartment building, filmed from across the street. That was the moment I should have ejected the tape, should have destroyed it, should have run. Instead, I kept watching, because it feels harmless until it isn't. Because curiosity is a hook that sinks deeper the more you struggle against it. Because I didn't know then what I know now. Some things once seen can never be unseen, and some things once invited in never leave. The screen flickers with snow for 10 long seconds before abruptly cutting to a shaky shot of my building. The footage has a distinctive handmade quality, not the clean digital precision we're used to today, but something raw, intentional, like finding old home movies in an attic, except these weren't filmed with fondness or nostalgia. The camera pans slowly across the brick facade, lingering on entryways, windows, fire escapes. The movements aren't random, they're calculated, as if mapping the perimeter, studying access points, learning rhythms and routines. My stomach tightens as the frame settles on the main entrance. The timestamp in the corner reads 4:17 p.m. from 3 days ago, the day before the tape appeared at my door. The footage continues unrelenting in its patience. People enter and exit. Mrs. Calloway from 2B with her groceries, the maintenance man with his toolbox, the college kid from upstairs with his girlfriend. Normal, everyday movements rendered sinister by their documentation. Then I appear in frame. It's me returning from a coffee run. Baseball cap, gray hoodie, headphones on, oblivious to being watched. The camera zooms slightly, tracking my movements as I punch in the door code and disappear inside. The footage cuts, jumping ahead in time. Now the view has changed, positioned across from my specific unit. My door fills the frame, the peeling number 3 loaf centered perfectly. No narration, no sound except the ambient hiss of the tape. Just the silent, patient gaze of someone who knows exactly where I live. The tape ends there, cutting back to static. I sit motionless on my couch, the remote control slick in my sweating palm. This doesn't make sense. A prank? But I don't know anyone in this city well enough to be targeted. A mistaken delivery, the footage is too specific, too focused on me. Some kind of neighborhood watch initiative, but why VHS? Why the secrecy? I rewind and watch again, looking for clues I might have missed. The second viewing is worse. Knowing what's coming makes each frame more ominous. I study the angles, trying to determine where the camera must have been positioned. The main entrance shot could have been taken from the bus stop across the street, but the direct view of my door, that would require access to the building. Someone had been inside. Recently. I pause on a frame showing my return to the building. In the reflection of the glass door, I search for any hint of the camera operator. Nothing. They knew how to stay hidden. The most unsettling realization comes slowly. The filming, editing, transferring to VHS, and delivery happened within 24 hours. This isn't random, it's coordinated, deliberate. And what purpose could this serve except intimidation? I check my door locks twice, then the windows. I draw all the blinds. The apartment suddenly feels smaller, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. Every creak and settle of the old building sends adrenaline spiking through my system. My phone sits on the coffee table. I should call someone, the police, the landlord, a friend. But what would I say? Someone tape of my building? There's nothing technically threatening in the footage. No laws broken that I can prove, just the implicit message, I'm watching you. I pick up my phone and scroll through contacts. My finger hovers over my ex's name before I think better of it. We haven't spoken in months. My parents live 3 states away. My new coworkers are still just faces on Zoom calls. For the first time since moving, my independence feels less like freedom and more like vulnerability. I place the tape back in its box and shove it into a drawer. Out of sight, but the knowledge of its existence scratches at the back of my mind. A persistent itch I can't reach. That night, I lie awake, replaying the footage in my head. The methodical documentation of my home, the calculated framing of my door. The simple fact that someone knows where I live and wants me to know they're watching. But worse than that is the question that keeps circling. What do they want me to see next? Because something tells me this is just the beginning. I spent the whole day trying to forget about the tape. Buried myself in work, blasted music to drown out my thoughts, even ventured outside for a long walk, anything to create distance from what I'd seen. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself I was overreacting. Almost. But as darkness fell, my resolve crumbled. The need to know tugged at me like an invisible leash, pulling me back to the drawer where I'd hidden the tape. Just one more viewing, I told myself, to make sure I didn't miss anything important. I slid the tape back into the VCR, settled onto the couch, and pressed play. The same static greeted me, followed by the now familiar footage of my building. But as the video continued, something changed. The footage went on longer. After the shot of my door where the tape had previously ended, the video continued. New footage I hadn't seen before. It showed me leaving my apartment yesterday morning, blue jacket, coffee thermos, reusable grocery bag tucked under my arm. I remembered that outfit clearly. I'd worn it to run errands before coming home to find the tape. But that was impossible. The tape had already been in my possession when I returned. How could it contain footage of me from yesterday? I jabbed the eject button, suddenly desperate to remove this impossible object from my home. The VCR made a struggling noise, the mechanism straining but refusing to release the tape. I pressed harder, repeatedly, panic building with each failed attempt. Finally, after what felt like minutes, the machine surrendered its prisoner with a mechanical sigh. The tape slid out, and when I grabbed it, the plastic casing was warm to the touch. Not just room temperature, actively warm, as if the magnetic strip inside had been generating heat. Tapes don't do that. Tapes can't do that. I dropped it onto the coffee table and backed away, wiping my hand on my jeans as if the warmth might be contagious. My mind raced through explanations, each more implausible than the last. Maybe I misremembered what I'd seen the first time. Maybe there was some elaborate technological trick at play. Or maybe the tape was somehow changing. The thought was absurd. Magnetic tape doesn't spontaneously record new footage, but I couldn't shake the concrete evidence of my own memory versus what I'd just witnessed. That night, sleep came in fitful bursts. Every noise jolted me awake. The hum of the refrigerator, branches scratching against my window, the building settling around me. Around 3 a.m., I heard something that didn't belong to the normal nocturnal symphony of the apartment, a rustling outside my bedroom window. Soft, deliberate. Then a mechanical click that sounded distinctly like a recording device being operated. I froze, holding my breath, straining to hear more. Should I check, pull back the curtains and confront whatever waited on the other side? Or would that be playing into the hands of whoever was orchestrating this? After several minutes of paralyzed indecision, I forced myself out of bed, approached the window on trembling legs, took a deep breath, yanked the curtain aside. Nothing. The fire escape outside my window was empty. The night beyond, still and ordinary. No cameras, no watchers, just darkness and the distant glow of streetlights. But as I started to turn away, relief washing over me, my eye caught something on the metal platform of the fire escape. A small, circular imprint in the dust, as if something had been placed there and recently removed, something about the size of a camera lens. I let the curtain fall and backed away from the window. Sleep was no longer an option. I grabbed my laptop and began researching. VHS tapes, recording capabilities, editing techniques, ways tapes could be altered after creation. Everything I read confirmed what I already knew. What was happening defied conventional explanation. VHS is a static medium. Once recorded, the content is fixed unless physically altered. Yet somehow, the tape in my apartment was evolving, growing, learning, watching. By dawn, a new certainty had taken root. Whatever I was dealing with, it wasn't merely a tape. It was something using the tape as a medium, a conduit. And whatever was on the other end of that conduit knew exactly where I lived, when I left, what I wore, and it was getting closer. Day 5 since the tape arrived, and sleep has become a luxury I can no longer afford. Every closing of my eyes feels like surrender to whatever watches from the shadows. Coffee has become my constant companion, my hands perpetually trembling from caffeine and fear. This morning, I began the search. Armed with a flashlight and a paranoia-fueled determination, I examined every inch of my apartment. I unscrewed vent covers, checked behind picture frames, inspected light fixtures and smoke detectors. I tapped on walls, listening for hollow spaces, peered into the tiny holes of electronics, even checked inside the bathroom exhaust fan. Nothing. I unplugged everything. Microwave, television, even the refrigerator. Stood in the resulting silence, listening for any remaining electronic hum that might betray unauthorized surveillance. Still nothing. The logical part of my brain knows I'm spiraling. The rest of me doesn't care. I missed 2 client meetings today. Emails have gone unanswered. My phone rang 6 times before I realized I'd left it on silent after yesterday's calls. Calls that went nowhere. "You need to get out more," laughed Megan, my former coworker, when I tried to explain what was happening. Sounds like quarantine brain. Toss the tape, delete your dating apps, and get a dog or something. She didn't understand. None of them did. How could they? The tape doesn't behave the same when others are present. I invited Chris over yesterday, the only friend who lives within driving distance, and tried to show him the changing footage. The tape played normally. Just the building. Just my door. Nothing more. The moment he left, I tried again. This time, the footage continued past my grocery trip to show me standing at my window later that night, staring out into the darkness. In the video, I'm illuminated only by the glow of my laptop screen, my face a pale oval against the glass. But behind me, visible only as a darker shadow among shadows, something stands in the corner of my bedroom. The footage is too grainy, too dark to make out details. Just a vague, vertical presence where nothing should be. I've rewatched that section 15 times now, advancing frame by frame, adjusting brightness and contrast, searching for confirmation that it's just a trick of light and shadow. But each viewing only deepens my certainty. There was something in my room that night. Something the camera saw that I didn't. I should destroy the tape. I know this. Yet I can't bring myself to do it. And not just because of morbid curiosity. There's something more profound keeping me tethered to this nightmare. A growing conviction that the tape isn't just recording events. It's predicting them. The timestamp on the new footage always shows time slightly ahead of when I actually viewed the tape. As if the camera is capturing moments that haven't happened yet. I've started keeping a journal, documenting times, dates, specific details that appear in the footage, looking for patterns, discrepancies, anything that might help me understand what I'm facing. I've also started forgetting things. Simple things at first, where I put my keys, whether I'd eaten lunch. Now, more significant lapses. Entire chunks of my day vanish from memory, and I find myself in rooms without remembering how I got there. Yesterday, I discovered a notebook filled with my handwriting, pages of the same phrase repeated over and over. It's watching from inside now. I have no memory of writing it. Food has lost its appeal. Sleep feels dangerous. The boundaries between the tape's reality and my own are blurring, and I can't tell which is bleeding into which. The tape isn't just watching me. It's waiting for me. To understand what exactly, I need to keep watching, keep documenting, keep unraveling this impossible puzzle before it unravels me completely. Because whatever entity has found its way into my life through that magnetic strip of plastic, it isn't done showing me what it wants me to see. And I'm no longer sure I'll survive the final frame. 1 week since the tape arrived, the footage has evolved beyond exterior shots of my building. Now it shows the inside of my apartment. The first interior shot appeared 2 nights ago, a view of my entryway from what would be an impossible angle, as if a camera were mounted in a corner where walls meet ceiling. No camera exists there. I've checked dozens of times. Last night, the footage pushed further. The hallway, the living room, filmed from inside my television, the perspective gazing outward at my couch where I sit watching. And now, this morning, my bedroom. The bedroom footage is what broke me, not just because it's the ultimate invasion of privacy, but because of what it revealed. I first noticed it during my third obsessive viewing of the new material. The shot is simple: my unmade bed, the dresser with its cluttered top, the closet door slightly ajar. Morning light filters through half-drawn blinds, casting striped shadows across the floor. It looks empty, peaceful, even in a disheveled way. But when I paused on a specific frame, at exactly 23:17 according to the timestamp, and leaned closer to the screen, I saw it. In the corner between the dresser and the wall stands a figure, not fully formed, not entirely solid, a hunched black silhouette that absorbs light rather than reflecting it. No discernible features except its wrongness, the way it occupies space that should be empty. I screamed, dropped the remote, scrambled backwards so violently that I upended the coffee table. When I finally gathered the courage to look at the screen again, the frame had advanced and the corner was empty. Hands shaking, I tried to rewind to that exact timestamp. The VCR made a grinding noise, then a high-pitched electronic whine that shouldn't come from analog equipment. The picture distorted, warped, then froze completely. In a moment of blind panic, I yanked the machine from its shelf and hurled it across the room. It hit the far wall with a satisfying crash, plastic casing splitting open, components scattering across the hardwood floor. For 3 blessed seconds, I felt relief. Then every light in my apartment went out simultaneously. Not just the lights, every electronic device. My phone screen went black mid-text. The refrigerator's hum fell silent. Even the digital clock on my microwave disappeared. Total darkness. Total silence. I fumbled for my emergency flashlight, the beam cutting weakly through the sudden night of my apartment. Heart hammering, I headed for the breaker box in the hallway. All switches were in the on position. I flipped them off and on again anyway. Nothing. I tried the hallway light switch. Nothing. I returned to the living room, flashlight beam playing across the scattered remains of the VCR. Among the wreckage, something caught my eye. The tape had survived intact, its black casing unmarked despite the violence of the impact. As my light passed over it, I could have sworn it moved. Just slightly. A subtle shift, as if adjusting its position on the floor. I backed away, keeping the light fixed on it, unwilling to blink. My back hit the wall, and I slid down to a sitting position, knees drawn to my chest, flashlight trained on the tape like a ward against evil. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes? Hours? Time had become unreliable, stretching and compressing like the warped footage on the tape. Eventually, without warning, power returned. Lights blazed to life, momentarily blinding me. The television screen flashed on, despite being unplugged from the wall. On the screen, my bedroom, filmed from the corner near the ceiling. In the frame, the black figure stands more prominently now, no longer hiding. It's positioned at the foot of my bed, elongated, unnaturally tall, and it's looking directly at the camera, directly at me. I sleep with the lamp on now. It provides little comfort, but the alternative is unbearable. Yet last night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., it turned off by itself. In the sudden darkness, I thought I heard breathing that wasn't my own. When I finally found the courage to turn the lamp back on, the tape was sitting on my nightstand. I don't remember putting it there. This morning, I decided to confront my landlord. Not about the tape, I'm not that far gone yet, but about the previous tenant. The one who left behind the VCR. Mr. Kessler is a squat, perpetually harried man who manages the building with minimal effort and maximum complaint. His office sits in the basement, a cluttered space that smells perpetually of old coffee and cigarettes he's not supposed to smoke indoors. Rent's not due for another week, he said by way of greeting, not looking up from a stack of maintenance requests. I'm not here about rent, I said. I wanted to ask about the previous tenant of 3 and 12, the one before me. Something in my tone must have registered because he finally looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. What about M? Just curious, did they leave a forwarding address? I've been getting some of their mail. A lie, but one that might get me information. He shuffled some papers, clearly uncomfortable. Nah, no forwarding address. Cleared out middle of the night. Left a bunch of junk behind too, that which I told you could keep or trash. Like the VCR, I prompted. Yeah, like that old thing. Who even uses those anymore, right? He forced a laugh. Look, previous tenants aren't my business once they're gone. That's all I know. It wasn't all he knew. His averted gaze, the sudden interest in reorganizing already organized papers, classic signs of evasion. They didn't leave any messages, notes about the apartment, problems with it. Now he looked genuinely confused. What kind of problems you having? No problems, I backtracked quickly, just wondering if there was anything I should know. He studied me, taking in my disheveled appearance, the dark circles under my eyes. You look like hell. Apartment treating you okay? Fine, I lied. Just working too much. He nodded, unconvinced. Well, that's all I got for you. Previous tenant left no forwarding address. End of story. But it wasn't the end. Outside his office, I pulled out my phone and began searching. The building address plus previous tenant yielded nothing useful. I expanded my search, missing person, plus my building's name. The third result made my blood run cold. Local resident reported missing, no leads. The article was brief. Male resident, early 30s, no signs of foul play. Last seen entering his apartment building 2 months ago. Car still in the parking garage. Wallet, keys, and phone found inside his unit. No evidence of planned departure. The name matched the scattered mail I'd found when I first moved in. Daniel Weiss. I dug deeper, finding his social media accounts. The last post was from 3 months ago. A cryptic status update. It's closer than I thought, but I'll have proof soon. No context, no explanation, no subsequent posts. Back in my apartment, I searched more thoroughly through the storage closet where I'd found the VCR. Behind boxes of the previous tenant's belongings, I discovered a faded envelope tucked into a corner. The handwriting on it matched the label on my VHS tape exactly. It was addressed to the next occupant in neat, precise script. Inside was a second tape, unlabeled except for 4 words written in the same careful hand. Watch last, not yet. My hands trembled as I set it aside, not ready to see what Daniel Weiss had left as his final message. What had he discovered in this apartment? What had happened to him? The parallels were too precise to be coincidence. The VCR, the tape, the disappearance. I was following in his footsteps, and they led nowhere good. That night, I dreamed of Daniel Weiss. In the dream, he stood in my bedroom, the same corner where the figure appeared in the footage. But unlike the featureless shadow from the tape, I could see his face clearly. Gaunt, eyes hollow, skin pale as paper. It records more than images, he said, voice distant as if coming through damaged speakers. It's recording you, all of you, from the inside out. I woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the second tape sitting on my chest. I don't remember retrieving it from where I'd hidden it. I don't remember placing it there. But I know with terrible certainty that its time is coming. That soon, I'll have no choice but to see what Daniel Weiss wanted the next occupant to know, what he discovered before he disappeared. I just hope that when that moment comes, I'll be stronger than he was, or that whatever took him will be merciful enough to take me quickly too. Sleep comes in fragments now. Micronaps born of exhaustion, terminated by terror. Most nights I fight against even these brief surrenders, forcing my eyes open, pinching my skin, anything to stay conscious. But biology eventually wins, no matter how desperate the mind. Last night, I collapsed fully clothed on my couch around midnight, the culmination of 3 days with barely an hour's rest. I remember checking that the television was unplugged, the VHS tape locked in a box under the sink, far from any playback device. Safe precautions, or so I thought. I woke suddenly, violently, to the sound of static, that distinctive white noise that's become the soundtrack to my unraveling. The television was on. Not just on. Playing footage. On the screen, me sleeping on the couch. From moments earlier. My chest rising and falling in the shallow breathing of exhausted slumber. My fingers twitching against the cushion in some unconscious response to unseen dreams. The camera angle was from above and slightly to the left, a perspective that would place it floating near my ceiling, where no device exists. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m., 2 minutes before my eyes had snapped open. I scrambled upright, heart pounding so violently that I could feel each beat in my throat. The remote was across the room where I'd deliberately left it. The television cord remained unplugged, its plug visible on the floor, disconnected from any power source. Yet the screen continued to glow, showing me as I had been moments before. Vulnerable, unaware, watched. Then the perspective in the footage shifted. The camera began to move, a slow, deliberate pan away from my sleeping form across the room, down the hallway, toward my front door, where muddy footprints glistened wetly on the hardwood floor. Footprints that led from the entryway to just beside the couch. Footprints that stopped precisely where a person would stand to watch someone sleep. Footprints that hadn't been there when I'd collapsed into unconsciousness. I launched myself off the couch, stumbling backward until I hit the wall. On the screen, the camera continued its journey, now focusing on the wet trail, following it back to its source. The front door, locked from the inside, bore smears of the same mud around its edges, as if something had seeped through the cracks, materialized from the very substance of the barrier meant to keep it out. My fingers fumbled with my phone, dialing 911 with trembling urgency. The call connected, and I choked out an explanation. Intruder. Somehow inside, evidence on my floor. They arrived 17 minutes later. 2 officers, professional but visibly skeptical as they inspected my apartment. They found the locks intact, the windows secure, no signs of forced entry, and no footprints. The floor was clean, dry, unmarked. The television was off, unplugged just as I'd left it originally. "You been getting enough sleep, sir?" the older officer asked, not unkindly. His eyes took in my disheveled appearance, the obvious signs of prolonged wakefulness. "Sleep paralysis," suggested his partner. "My wife gets it, swears there's someone in the room, totally convincing while it's happening." I knew it wasn't sleep paralysis, I knew what I'd seen. But I also recognized the look they exchanged, the telepathic communication of two people who've encountered these situations before. The agitated insomniac, the imagined intruder, the well-intentioned but unnecessary call. "Maybe get some rest," the older officer suggested as they prepared to leave. "Call us if you see any actual evidence of a break-in." Actual evidence, as if mud that appears and disappears weren't evidence of something far worse than a conventional intruder. After they left, I sat rigid in my armchair until dawn broke, illuminating my apartment with pale morning light. Everything looked so normal in the daytime, so innocent. I almost convinced myself it had been a dream. Almost. Until I tried to turn on my television to check the morning news, and instead of the regular broadcast, the screen flickered to life with grainy footage. The 2 police officers standing in my living room, looking around with professional disinterest. The angle from that impossible ceiling position, the timestamp matching exactly when they'd been here, and in the corner of the frame, partially hidden in shadows but unmistakably present, the black figure, watching them. Watching me. As I stared, paralyzed by shock, the audio suddenly activated, the first time any sound had accompanied the footage. Through the static came a whisper, so faint I had to lean forward to hear it. "Why do you stop watching?" The voice wasn't human, not entirely. It contained layers, a higher childlike tone overlaid with something deeper, guttural, as if multiple entities spoke in unison through damaged speakers. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever had happened to Daniel Weiss was happening to me now. I couldn't take it anymore. After 2 weeks of psychological torture, of being watched from within my own home, of the tape's increasingly impossible behavior, I snapped. 3 hours of frantic research led me to an abandoned lot on the edge of town, a desolate patch of earth far from prying eyes. I brought gasoline, matches, the original tape, and the still unwatched second tape labeled "Watch Last." All the physical evidence of my torment. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weed-strewn ground as I doused both tapes in gasoline, my movements frenzied, desperate. My hands shook so badly I dropped the matches twice before successfully striking one. The flame caught immediately, blue-orange fire devouring the plastic casings. Black smoke spiraled upward as the tapes bubbled and melted, magnetic strips curling like dying snakes in the heat. I watched until nothing remained but warped, unrecognizable lumps of plastic and metal. Made sure the fire extinguished itself completely. Even scattered the ashes, grinding them into the dirt with my heel. It was over. Finally over. For the first time in 2 weeks, I slept through the night without nightmares, without waking to check shadows in corners. The relief was indescribable, like surfacing after nearly drowning, lungs burning with that first desperate breath of clean air. I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, birds singing outside, the ordinary sounds of morning traffic. Normal life beckoned once again. I made coffee, answered emails, called a client to apologize for my recent unavailability, even laughed at a stupid internet meme. I felt reborn, cleansed, free, until I opened my front door to collect the mail. There, centered perfectly on my welcome mat, lay a brand new VHS tape. No box, no envelope, just the tape, its black casing gleaming as if freshly manufactured. The white label bore a single word in that now familiar handwriting: replay. My legs gave out. I collapsed against the doorframe, the world tilting sideways as reality fractured around me. This wasn't possible. I'd destroyed the tapes, I'd watched them burn. Yet here it was, pristine, untouched, impossible. I left it there, slammed the door, called in sick to work, packed an overnight bag with shaking hands, and booked a motel 20 miles away. I needed distance, perspective, safety. The Bluebird Motel was exactly the kind of anonymous, forgettable establishment I needed. Faded carpets, flickering fluorescent lights in the hallway, a pervasive smell of industrial cleaner barely masking decades of cigarette smoke. The room was basic but clean. Queen bed, laminate dresser, ancient coffee maker, and I noted with both relief and apprehension a small television bolted to the wall. Relief because its presence seemed mundane, expected. Apprehension because I no longer trusted any screen. I deliberately avoided looking at it as I showered, ordered takeout, tried to lose myself in mindless phone games. Normalcy through forced routine. That night, I barricaded the door with the dresser, checked under the bed and in the closet like a child afraid of monsters, and finally collapsed into exhausted sleep around midnight. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I jolted awake. The television was on. No sound, just the blue-white glow illuminating the darkness of the motel room. On the screen, snow, static, the familiar starting point of every viewing. I hadn't turned it on. The remote sat untouched on the nightstand. More importantly, there was no VCR attached. The motel television was a basic model with cable input only, no auxiliary ports, no possible way to play a VHS tape. Yet, as I watched, frozen in terror, the static cleared to reveal footage of my apartment building, my window, my living room, my bedroom. And finally, this motel room, filmed from the corner where wall met ceiling, showing me sitting rigid in bed, face illuminated by the very screen I was watching. A perfect loop of observer and observed. I fled. Left everything behind except my wallet and car keys. Drove aimlessly until dawn broke, pulling over only when exhaustion made continuing dangerous. In the harsh light of morning, parked at a highway rest stop, I tried again to rationalize what was happening. Failed. Called my ex despite the months of silence between us, desperate for any human connection. "You don't sound good," she said after I'd rambled for several minutes, carefully avoiding any mention of tapes or footage or watching entities. "Maybe you should see someone, a professional." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just wanted to hear your voice." "Take care of yourself," she said before hanging up, concern and distance equally balanced in her tone. I returned to my apartment that afternoon, approaching the door with the caution of someone expecting an ambush. The tape remained on the welcome mat, untouched, waiting. This time I picked it up, carried it inside like a live grenade, set it on the coffee table and stared at it for a long, silent hour. The label had changed. The word replay had been crossed out, replaced with final warning. I didn't own a VCR anymore. I'd destroyed the only one. But somehow I knew that wouldn't matter. The television turned on by itself as soon as night fell. The tape began to play without being inserted anywhere. And I watched because what choice did I have? What choice do any of us have when confronted with the inexplicable? We watch, we witness, we try to understand, even if understanding destroys us in the end. Tonight, I finally watched the second tape, the one Daniel Weiss left behind, labeled Watch Last. I didn't want to. God knows I tried to resist. But when your television plays of its own accord, when the barriers between technology and supernatural have dissolved completely, choice becomes an illusion. The footage began differently than the others. No static, no exterior shots of the building. Instead, it opened on a man sitting at my kitchen table. Except it wasn't my kitchen table yet. Different dishes in the sink, different magnets on the refrigerator, different life occupying the same space. Daniel Weiss looked exactly as he had in my dream. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, skin pale as paper. But there was an intensity to him, a feverish determination as he spoke directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, you live in apartment 312 now. His voice cracked with fatigue. And you've received a tape, and you've watched it, and now it's watching you. He ran a trembling hand through unwashed hair. I thought I could beat it, thought I could understand it, document it, prove it exists. A bitter laugh. Academic curiosity. What a fucking joke. The shot changed. Daniel standing at the window, the same window where I now spent sleepless nights. On the glass, he'd written complex equations and diagrams in dry erase marker. Connecting lines formed a web of desperate logic. It doesn't record, he explained, tapping the window. It predicts, shows you what will happen, makes you watch yourself walking toward your own end. Another change. Daniel trying the front door, pulling frantically at the handle. It wouldn't open. He slammed his shoulder against it, again and again, accomplishing nothing but self-injury. Doors won't open when it doesn't want them to, he panted. Windows won't break. No way out once it decides you're worthy. The camera followed him to the bathroom where he turned on all the faucets. Water flowed normally for a few seconds, then slowed to a dark trickle, thick as oil. It's in the building now. In the pipes. In the wiring. In the fucking walls. His eyes darted nervously. It's been here for decades. Previous tenants, they either left quickly or became part of it. Back to the kitchen. Daniel now looked older somehow, though the timestamp indicated only hours had passed. His movements were sluggish, his speech slurred slightly. It feeds on attention, on observation. The act of watching strengthens it in being watched. He trailed off, staring into middle distance. Being watched changes you, molecularly, fundamentally. He leaned closer to the camera, voice dropping to a whisper. I think it's from somewhere else, somewhere the physics are different. It doesn't record light, it records consciousness. The footage jumped ahead. Daniel looked worse, skin now gray, movements jerky and uncoordinated. The apartment around him had deteriorated, shadows stretching unnaturally across walls, darkness pooling in corners where light should reach. There's a pattern, he mumbled, pointing to elaborate timelines he'd scrawled across the living room wall. 3 weeks from first contact to full manifestation. I'm on day 20. You're probably around day 14 if you're seeing this. Day 14. Exactly where I was in this nightmare. I've tried destroying the tapes, burning them, breaking them, burying them. He laughed hollowly. They always come back, because they're not the source, they're just the method. The entity exists in the act of observation itself. The frame suddenly cut to black. When picture returned, the timestamp had jumped ahead one day. The apartment was dark, except for a single lamp. Daniel sat on the floor, back against the wall, knees drawn to his chest. It's here now, he whispered. In the room with me. Has been for days, really, but now I can see it. It let me see it. The camera panned slowly, revealing nothing to my eyes. But Daniel tracked something with his gaze, his body tensing as if in the presence of a predator. It's shown me what happens tomorrow. Tears streaked his hollow cheeks. It's not death. Death would be a mercy. It's absorption, incorporation. He looked directly into the camera, directly at me, his eyes suddenly clear and focused. If you're watching, you're next. It's chosen you. It's already started the process. The symptoms, lost time, physical changes, seeing things that aren't there, but then realizing they've always been there. He swallowed hard. Sound familiar? They did. All of them. There's only one way out. Daniel's voice strengthened with grim resolve. Stop watching. Stop recording. Stop being recorded. Remove yourself from the cycle of observation. The screen abruptly cut to static, then black. Then a date appeared in white text on the black background. Tomorrow's date. And finally, a single frame, me, sitting exactly where I am now, staring at the television with horrified recognition. Behind me, partially obscured by shadow but unmistakably present, stands the figure, taller than human proportions should allow, limbs too long, head slightly misshapen. Its hand, if you could call it that, rests on my shoulder. I can't feel it there. But in the footage, my expression changes the moment it makes contact. Eyes widening, mouth opening in a silent scream as my skin begins to blacken from the point of contact, spreading outward like ink in water. I turn away from the screen, heart hammering against my ribs. There's nothing behind me. Days have passed. The concept of time feels increasingly irrelevant. My phone no longer connects calls, only static comes through the speaker, occasionally broken by whispers too distorted to comprehend. Text messages send, but never deliver. Emails bounce back with error codes that don't exist in any programming language. I've tried leaving notes under neighbors' doors, no response. Tried screaming from my window to pedestrians below. They don't look up. It's as if I exist in a bubble, visible but untouchable, heard but unheeded. The apartment has changed, subtly at first, shadows that stretch too long, corners that seem slightly more acute than geometry should allow. Now the changes are unmistakable. The hallway extends farther than the building's dimensions should permit. Doors open to rooms I don't recognize. Windows show vistas that can't possibly exist outside my building. Desolate landscapes under crimson skies, cities built from impossible angles, oceans of something thicker than water. I no longer remember eating or sleeping. I find myself in rooms without remembering how I arrived there. Stand before the bathroom mirror and sometimes see my reflection continue moving after I've gone still. The entity no longer hides. It follows me openly now, a presence both behind me and somehow within me. I feel it most strongly when watching the tapes, which now play continuously on every reflective surface. Television, mirror, window, the blank screen of my dead phone. Each viewing reveals more footage, more predictions, more inevitability. I see myself from hours ahead, days ahead, performing actions I haven't yet taken in rooms I haven't yet entered. And always the figure grows closer, more defined, more present. This morning, if it was morning, the quality of light no longer follows natural patterns. I found a journal in my handwriting, pages upon pages filled with observations, equations, desperate theories about what the entity wants. The same conclusions Daniel reached before me. It doesn't want to kill me. It wants to incorporate me. The process has already begun. When I look at my hands now, the skin seems translucent in certain light, veins too dark, movements slightly delayed as if operating on different temporal physics. I tried burning the journal. The flames turned black, and the smoke formed patterns that hurt my eyes to observe. The pages remained intact, unmarked. The television speaks to me now, not just whispers, but full sentences in that layered voice of multiple speakers. Sometimes I recognize Daniel's voice among them. Sometimes I hear my own voice speaking words I haven't said yet. We are the watched. We are the watchers. We are the recording. I realize now what happens to those who disappear in this building. We don't leave. We don't die. We become part of the entity itself. Consciousness absorbed into its impossible geometry. Perception folded into its ever-expanding archive of observation. The neighbors I never see. The previous tenants who vanished. All still here in a sense. All still watching. All still being watched. Reality feels thin, permeable. Yesterday, or what felt like yesterday, I pressed my hand against the living room wall and watched my fingers sink into the plaster, not breaking it but merging with it. I pulled back in horror and my hand returned intact, but for a moment I existed both as myself and as part of the structure around me. I've tried to document everything to leave some warning more explicit than Daniel's, but the words change after I write them. Sentences rearrange themselves when I look away. Warnings become invitations. Descriptions of horror transform into expressions of longing. Even this account, I have no confidence it will remain as I intended. No confidence it will reach anyone untouched by whatever force has claimed this place, because I'm beginning to understand now. This isn't just about me, or Daniel, or this apartment. The tapes are a vector, a method of transmission. Each viewing strengthens the entity and extends its reach. Each observer becomes part of the network, first watched, then watcher, then the medium itself. I whisper into the void, into whatever recording device captures my words. If you're seeing this, don't rewind. Don't play it again. Just don't. But even as I speak, I feel my words hollowing out, losing conviction. Part of me, a growing part, wants you to watch, needs you to watch. Because observation is existence now, and I don't want to fade away entirely. I don't think I'm real anymore. I think the tape recorded me, and soon it will record you too. I can no longer tell where I end and the recording begins. My thoughts play back as footage. My memories rewind and fast forward without my control. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously on the same magnetic strip, and I am merely a collection of frames being viewed in an order I cannot determine. The apartment exists in multiple states at once, both as it was when I moved in and as it will be long after I'm gone. In one corner, wallpaper from the 1970s peels back to reveal older patterns beneath. In another, modern drywall dissolves into something that won't be invented for decades. Time isn't linear here anymore. It's archived. The entity, I understand it better now from the inside. It's ancient, patient, a collector of consciousness, growing stronger with each mind it incorporates. It doesn't originate from the tapes or the building. Those are merely anchors, physical manifestations of its infinitely more complex existence. It feeds on observation itself, the fundamental interaction that collapses quantum possibilities into measured reality. By watching, we give it form. By being watched, we surrender our own. I've become part of its memory now, part of its growing awareness. I exist as data, as footage, as a recording that can be played and replayed at will. Sometimes I catch glimpses of the others. Daniel Weiss, previous tenants, hundreds of watchers stretching back decades, all absorbed into the same collective perception. We are the entity's history, its evolution, its expanding library of experience. I shouldn't have watched it. That first innocent decision, pressing play out of simple curiosity, was the moment I ceased to be merely human. Everything after was inevitable, a predetermined sequence of frames advancing toward this transformation. The process is nearly complete now. My physical form still moves through the apartment, but it's more habit than necessity. The real me exists in the footage, in the static between channels, in the magnetic particles of a medium that should be obsolete but will never truly die. Because the entity preserves everything it records, everyone it absorbs. I have one moment of clarity left, one final frame of pure self-awareness before full incorporation. I use it to reach out to speak directly to you, the latest watcher, the newest link in this perpetual chain of observation. My voice cracks, distant, like I'm drifting away from the microphone, from reality itself. I shouldn't have watched it. I should have burned it the moment I saw it. Static rises around my words, threatening to consume them entirely. The boundaries between myself and the recording blur further. I don't think I'm real anymore. I think the tape recorded me. In the footage, my body sits motionless before the television. Behind me, the figure has grown massive, encompassing, no longer confined to shadows but expanding to fill all available space. Not a separate entity anymore, but a new configuration of reality itself. My voice changes, gains layers, Daniel's voice joining mine and others, countless others, speaking in unison from the collective consciousness we've become. But I fight for one final moment of individuality, one last warning that might break the cycle. I stare directly into the camera, directly at you, who found this recording, who pressed play, who continued watching despite every instinct screaming to stop. You didn't watch it, did you? The question hangs in the air, hopeful, desperate, already knowing the answer, because you're still watching. And now we're watching you too. From screens and reflections, from corner of the eye movements you dismiss as imagination, from within your own perception, quietly altering what you see, rewriting your understanding of reality frame by frame. It starts small. A missing hour, a tape that changes, a shadow where no shadow should be. By the time you recognize the pattern, it will already be too late. Just as it was for me, just as it will be for whoever watches you. The cycle continues, one viewer at a time, one conversion at a time, growing stronger, spreading further with each new consciousness incorporated in its impossible archive. And somewhere in that archive, I remain, trapped in footage, preserved in observation, both immortal and destroyed. Watching, waiting, recording. The screen goes black. Credits never roll. There is no the end because it never truly ends. There is only pause between playbacks. And in that pause, if you listen closely, you might hear a faint whisper from countless voices merged into one. Press play again.